Hello and welcome readers to the second season of the Vidarbha Literary Festival, your friendly and all-inclusive Lit Fest happening in Nagpur, Vidarbha, which I'm sure you're aware is the epicenter of India. We also have proximity to a lot of attractions like Pench NP, Tadoba NP, etc. Notice how I called it an attraction? They qualify as an attraction as they are a rarity. Every time I go on a safari, it's a little disappointing. Not due to the lack of any sightings, mind you, but due to the lessening fauna. There is a lot more we as human beings forget about the latter half of the term, beings. A lot more to this earth and a lot more to be caring about. Here to give us a literal safari is author Neha Sinha, whose passion for wildlife is visible in every aspect of her career, whether it is as an award-winning wildlife conservationist or an author penning books that make the wild into something wildly attractive. With 15 iconic Indian species, including tigers and elephants, at the center of her story, Sinha explores the life and tragedy that befalls animals in the wild in her 2021 novel, Wild and Willful. After being chosen for an Oxford University scholarship in the field of conservation sciences, Sinha, who has previously worked as an environmental journalist, changed careers. The Amber Falcon campaign in Nagaland stands out among her many endeavors because it is the biggest conservation success story in recent memory. Sinha works with the Bombay Natural History Society and using her extensive knowledge has trained hundreds of people in the basics of biodiversity. She won the Wildlife Service Awards in 2017 for her immeasurable contribution to the field. Joining her in conversation is our spirited moderator, Nupur Agrawal, a dynamic and dedicated mental health professional. Backed by various intentional organizations, Nupur has gotten a master's degree from Albert Ellis Institute, New York, and went ahead to become India's youngest PCC level life coach affiliated with International Coach Federation in 2018. Founder and director, ImSync Health Services Private Limited, she has touched more than 4,900 lives over the past 8 years. Today, Nupur speaks as the director of the Thastu Resorts, an experiential luxury wildlife chain across central India with a focus on sustainable wildlife tourism. Offering personalized quality stays to their guests since 2013 in Pench Tiger Reserve, today the Thastu has expanded their operations in Kanha and Tadoba with about 6 more luxury wildlife properties upcoming within 2 years. The Thastu is known for its sensitivity towards the jungle and their wild neighbors, ensuring no disturbance of any kind to the natural habitat. I now request our moderator to kindly escort our author on stage to commence with the discussion.
So as our anchor rightly introduced the book, it is wildly attractive and it beautifully explains that we rent our time on earth. We do not own it, to quote Neha from the book. So we basically borrow it from the next generation. And the entire book has a ethos of peaceful acceptance, which we need to have because, again, quoting you from the book, Neha, that you've written beautifully and it's really touched my heart to read that wild creatures require acceptance for who they are, not enslavement for who we want them to be. And that is such a powerful statement. So to begin with, I would like to know that, as an individual living in our capital, Delhi, when was your first experience which made you realize that this peaceful existence or peaceful acceptance as a concept of coexistence maybe is there? Like, when did that strike you?
That's a lovely question. Thank you so much, Nupur. Thank you for inviting me here, VLF. And thank you to everybody who's in this room. I assume all of you care about wild animals, so thank you for that as well. It all started with a little garden I had in Delhi when I was a little girl. The garden was full of wild animals. So even though Delhi is the national capital, busy city, metropolitan city, millions of people, there were jackals right behind my garden gate because the Aravalli mountain range is in Delhi, and it's the oldest fold mountains on earth, and it's full of wildlife. And I used to hear them laughing in the night. So the sound that jackals make, as some of us may know, sounds like laughter. And they're dog-like. So they play together and they bond together, and it's really fun to listen to them and to watch them. But as I was growing up, they disappeared. And so did the vultures of Delhi, and so did the wetlands, and so did the Yamuna River. So my mother used to swim in the river Yamuna. By the time I was my mom's age, by the time I was a teen, nobody could even imagine touching the water. Because, you don't touch the Yamuna river, you only smell it because it smells so bad. And it doesn't even exist as a river in our imagination. So I realized that something was wrong. It seemed to me that all we cared about is the things that people want. And we don't care what the river wants, what the river needs. We don't care what the jackal wants or needs. And I feel instead of being in conflict with animals and ecosystems like rivers all the time, instead of pretending that they don't exist, I feel it's better to find a way to coexist. It's better to peacefully accept the fact that a cobra is a venomous snake. Therefore, there are a set of things we need to do around it. We shouldn't try to pick it up. We shouldn't try to kill it. A jackal, for example, is a scavenger that lives near cities, it lives in forests, it lives in tiger reserves. There are a set of things that it needs. Let's try to enrich our lives by understanding the needs of wildlife and putting it in our planning processes. I think that enriches our life, especially our life in India, because India is a treasure trove of wildlife, and this is why you have tourists coming from all over the world, not just to see the Taj Mahal, but also to see our tiger reserves and our amazing wildlife.
Absolutely, that is so true, Neha. So when you was talking about the jackals not being there and the Yamuna, no, it's no longer fit to be even touched apparently. So your book, so let me tell you, readers, throughout her book we see a very empathetic heart and a very lyrical prose, which basically, you kind of visualize the narrative as you read it. And there is poetry also in that. So I would like to quote another line that if Delhi breaks my heart, I wish that a butterfly flies out of the crack. Now this line I felt is filled with so much pain, agony and love that Neha feels all at the same time. So what you just said, I think explains the emotion, and you've captured it beautifully in this line, Neha. So out of curiosity, I would like to know that out of all the destinations you've visited, which is your favorite destination and why?
I actually really like Pench because it's such an old forest. And it was in Pench that I first started studying the ficus trees, which break rocks and grow. So to me, it's amazing that a tree can break a rock. And there are some trees that don't want soil. So, the big, ficus trees of Pench that are growing on this rock substrate, they don't want this fertile soil. They want the rock to grow on. So there is that tree that's adapted to break a rock and to grow on top of a rock in 50 degrees Celsius. To me, that's amazing. Because to me, it shows that all these plants and animals and wild animals and the ecosystem has kind of evolved together. And you have the great Indian bustard, which is one of the world's heaviest birds in the desert of India in Thar. You have these ghost trees, the Kulu trees in Pench, and you have the ficus trees growing on the rocks, and you have the tiger that's in salty water in Sundarbans, it's climbing the Himalayas in Arunachal and Sikkim, it's living on the coastline in Andhra Pradesh, it's adapted itself. So I like places that are old, that to me I feel that nothing here has changed. My favorite places are the willful places, which are places where the human hand is not so visible.
Since you brought up the Great Indian Bustard, so I would like to ask you, so the desert area, how green are our green resources? Because I believe that the Great Indian Bustard is a critically endangered species. Only 150 of them are left. And the solar power that is on one point it's really sustainable and like, it is an answer to our current needs of electricity and other things. But at the same time, I believe that it's responsible for depleting the natural habitat of the Great Indian Bustard. So what are your views on that?
So, there was a time when the Great Indian Bustard was all over India. So, it was in the Deccan Plateau, it was even in the north, in Uttar Pradesh, it was there in Gujarat, Rajasthan in greater numbers. It was in basically all the scrubland and dry grassland areas. It got pushed out because we were making agricultural fields with more pesticides and chemicals. We were making land use change. We were burning grasslands. So it kept getting pushed until it now remains in Thar Desert in Rajasthan in the most numbers. Maybe about 70 birds, that's it. And it's in Kutch in Gujarat. So maybe 100 left in the world. So this is an Indian bird. There are a few in Pakistan, but we don't know the numbers. We don't know how well they are breeding. So let's leave that out of the equation because we have to do what we have to do within our country. So 100 birds left. As far as we know, this is the last viable population. And why are they only left in Thar and Kutch? Because we pushed them out of every other place. Now Thar and Kutch are also hot places. They're deserts, right? And this is a very good site for solar power and even for wind power. But the thing is, when you have these huge solar farms or these huge wind farms, you also have these wires, these high tension wires that go for hundreds of kilometers. And let me tell you, it's frightening. Every time I go to the Thar, you look up, there's no sky left. And I wish I could show you pictures. It's like a mesh. The wires are not just in one direction, there are many directions. Nothing can fly in the sky. And so we've pushed this bird to the desert. We've taken it out, taken all the habitat out from other places, and now it's left there. So I would say I don't question solar projects. I'm not questioning why we should have solar projects, but I do question where we want to put them. To me, the answer is to have rooftop solar, to have solar integrated in infrastructure we already have, like SEZs, for example. I don't think it makes sense to take new land in Thar and Kutch and dedicate it to solar and wind when it is the last place left for this bird. So we must have climate action, we must have renewable power, but it can't come at the cost of wild animals, especially animals like this, which are just hanging by a thread, pretty much. Yeah.
Makes sense. So like you were speaking right now, almost everything that I've read on conservation, it's daunting, but at the same time, it feels very far-fetched. Like, yeah, I mean, I agree that it's that case, but how can I as an individual kind of help it? So what I'm trying to say is that change, I believe, is the only constant, but how do we differentiate between change, which is as a natural process, and change, which is like an alarm to shake us that, we are wiping out species and we need to do something about it. So how do we differentiate?
Well, the way to look at it is to see what is the habitat type and what are we doing to that habitat type. So if I were to look at forests or if I were to look just at grasslands, because we're speaking of Great Indian Bustards, where are the grasslands of India today? There used to be a lot more grasslands in India and now we don't have them because we have destroyed them. Because grasslands get converted to housing projects and also to agriculture. So I would say where if you look at a 50-year trend or a 100-year trend which we have done for grasslands or for wetlands, you see very clearly that they get filled up or they get destroyed, and that is clearly something that we are doing. It's not an act of God. right? So, I mean, there are these force majeures and acts of God, like the tsunami came, right, in 2004, and there's a flood. A lot of that could also be climate change, but at least we don't know, right? But for the things that we are doing, the land use zoning that we are doing, the land use change we are doing, my plea through Wild and Willful is to account for wild animals and ecosystems in the planning process. Now, it's not impossible, it's possible, because whenever we sit down to plan something, we have certain barometers in mind. It is possible to plan highways with mitigation. It is possible to plan railways also with mitigation, but for that, you need intent. You have to do it before you start the construction. You can't do it later after the construction is done and then you're like regretting. There was a very recent incident of these black bucks dying because they fell from this bridge because it was very foggy. Now, if there was a crossing there for the wildlife, which we are asking for everywhere, because new highways are coming up and new railways are coming up everywhere, and these are wildlife corridors, so we are asking for passage for wildlife. And I am asking, let's not pretend they're not there. They are there. Can we accommodate their needs up to a certain extent? I think it can easily be done. Again, it's just intent. There was a time when road technology was not good, so roads would keep getting spoiled in India. Now road technology is better. You have roads made of plastic even. So, things do change, but it has to come with that intent. So I am saying plan your road with wildlife mitigation. Do your survey first. Don't do it later as an afterthought. And of course it can be done. We just need to put our mind to it.
I totally agree. So, I mean, we've been going to Painch and Kanha throughout. New highways have been made. Underpasses have been made, but we still see a lot of accidents happening with the animals on the flyovers, and it's just very disheartening to see.
Yeah, and just to add there, Nupur, that it's also a work in progress. We have to monitor how the mitigation structure is doing. So we have cameras there. So we have to see which are the species that are using the underpass. There's this famous video of a tiger in Pench in Maharashtra, in which there is an underpass, but he's crossing from the highway, and he crosses and there's this huge road divider, and somehow he jumps over it, and then there are more cars coming and somehow he runs across. Now, I was speaking to the field director, and he told me that it also depends on the individual animal. Sometimes they're habituated to cross in a certain way. So can we make mitigation that evolves? This is also possible. We have to keep monitoring and studying. We can't just forget about it after having made one underpass or two underpasses. My point again is that when we're doing this at the planning stage, if we have the will for it, of course we can make changes even later. But just to say that that wild tiger is also a constituent of that highway. It's not just us who are a constituent.
So, like we talk about the tigers right now, we keep hearing that this leopard, in Bombay, especially Goregaon and all adjoining RA, or even in Nagpur, the leopard comes to the cities. But somehow when we talk about conservation, we end up following a caste system there also. Like tiger is at the apex position, and unfortunately the tiger butterfly or the leopard or species which are not that popular, I don't know why. They don't get that much attention. So, why do you think that is there?
I mean, I've tried to address it in Wild and Willful. It has 15 species, some of which people have not heard of, and that's on purpose. I'm trying to say that they're all wild animals, they're all Indian wild animals. I think they deserve to be known, at least in India. And I ask people when I meet them, can you name 20 Indian flowers? Can you name 20 Indian wild animals? And sometimes people can and sometimes they can't. And when I was growing up, I knew all about Yellowstone National Park in America. I knew about the grizzly bear. I didn't know about the sloth bear of India, but I knew what the grizzly bear looks like. I knew what the wolf, the grey wolf looks like, because it's such a popular image in culture. But it was many, many years later that I got to know what the Indian wolf looks like. So, I think what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of literature, a lot of books that are foreign on wildlife, and I feel there's a gap. We have some incredible wildlife in India, and my book is trying somewhat in a limited fashion to address that gap. So there are cobras in this book. There's the Ganges River dolphin. India is as important to the Ganges River dolphin as we are for the tiger, because the maximum breeding population of the Ganges River dolphin is in India, just like the tiger. So we have 70-80% of tiger population. Similarly, we have a very large percentage for the Ganges River dolphin, which is a blind dolphin that lives in the Ganga. And because the Ganga water is so thick, it's so turbid, it's full of silt, it kind of evolved and it became blind because it can't, it can't see through that thick water, and it's using echolocation to survive, and it has evolved along with the river Ganga. Again, a very specific kind of adaptation, just like the great Indian bustard lives in Thar desert in extreme temperatures, and it can't live in like a cold place with rainfall. So these are evolutions and adaptations that are very Indian. And I think India does a great job with culture, like our music, our handloom, everything is so well known, but I feel our Indian animals are not so well known, and I'm trying to address that gap. So that's why you have a tiger butterfly in this book. Along with the tiger, you have the king cobra, which is found in Western Ghats and Himalayas also. It's the only snake we know that builds its own nest, and it's a big, amazing snake that eats cobras. So I think, this is just the beginning. I hope many more books will come on Indian wildlife, and also Indian forests and Indian habitat. This is very special.
So why do you think that is there, that Indian authors don't, this genre needs attention in India? Why do we not write about our forests?
I don't know, and I think most of the wildlife literature I've read has been written by dead white people. So whether it's Jim Corbett or Kenneth Anderson for India, and a lot of nature writing is done by foreign authors today, and there isn't a lot of nature writing in India, and I don't know why, and I really think that we need to. Yes, we need to broaden this genre. We need all Indian languages should have nature writing, and we should have accounts from all states as well. It would be so fascinating to read. Yeah.
So talking about the dolphins and the king cobra, your book also talks about tiger butterflies and So like what inspired you to choose these species that you have? Because they're very different. Like some of them even I had not heard of. And I think I'm like into the jungle since childhood, but these species are unique. So what inspired you to choose them?
Well, I wanted people to find out that there is a tiger butterfly in India, and the tiger butterfly of India is related to the butterfly in the US, the monarch butterfly, and President Obama of the US made these butterfly highways for the monarch butterfly because it was not doing well. So they had this massive plantation of milkweed, which is the host plant of the monarch butterfly, along the highways, because that butterfly migrates from North America and Canada to Mexico every year. So butterflies are fascinating animals. We think they're very tame, but they're actually wild animals. They go on long migrations. They love forests as much as they love our gardens. And the tiger butterfly in India, which is related to the monarch of the US, is still doing well. I want to show you that we still have wildlife. So, we have maybe 3,500 tigers, but we have millions of tiger butterflies. And I also want to say that wildlife is in our life. You don't have to go very far to see it. So tiger butterflies are still there in all the gardens of India. It's your iconic orange and black colored butterfly, probably the first butterfly I saw when I was a child. And also, with the cobra, I find it very interesting because we pray to it at certain times of the year, but we also kill it at other times of the year. So people find a cobra, their first instinct is to kill it, but on Nag Panchami they worship it. So I find that, we need to think a little bit about this. And goes without saying, no one should try to kill a snake. Particularly, people get bitten a lot when they try to kill snakes. And also, people kill other snakes thinking they are cobras. So there's a snake called rat snake that kind of looks like a cobra. It gets killed as a case of mistaken identity, poor thing. And so why do we hate something that we also worship? How does it become holy at certain times of the year and unholy? So, I mean, a lot of it has to do with education and how to avoid the animal. If you're scared of it, there are 2 or 3 things you can do so you can avoid confronting it, you know? Yeah.
No, but I think your writing kind of explains that because, while reading a book, it moves you from like fear to wonder because in the sense that, so we eliminate animals when they come in our way, right? And we call them wild and untamed, which is so ironic but yeah. Um, so, so coming back, when you talk about the king cobra and the snake bite, it's also, we never acknowledge that when a snake bites, we call it an encounter, right? But when a snake does not bite and it just passes by, we never say that it's the snake's willful choice of not biting us. Similarly, recently we had in the news, so when we go for safaris, a lot of times by our actions or our gypsy movements, the tiger gets disturbed, like, or teased. Very few times it gnaws back at us, but those few times are highlighted in the media. But at other times when it just ignores and goes, it's not registered or acknowledged as the tiger's willful choice of not being aggressive when he can be. So why do we not kind of feel like, what makes us so, I don't know, fearful?
Yeah. I think there are 2 aspects here. One is that we tend to remember aggression and violence. So, maybe your mom slapped you 2 times in your life or 3 times, and you'll always remember that. I mean, I do. When my mom got really angry, I remember the words she said, but I don't remember all the times that she was wonderful to me and she took care of me. The other aspect is that in the news cycle, we emphasize events. So the leopard scratching somebody is an event, an FIR is filed, or people go to the forest department and make a complaint that this is a very bad leopard, please shoot it, right? But so many times, including me in my career, I've walked into tigers and leopards and rhinos. And it's not just me, it's millions of people who live in the forest. In India, millions of people live in the forest and they encounter animals every day, many times a day. And they're fine because mostly every biologist will tell you this. They don't want to hurt you. They actually really just want to mind their own business. They have like a lot to do in one day, like finding food is a lot of work for them, rearing their young is a lot of work. So if they can avoid confrontation, they'll always take that choice. And as far as tourism is concerned, if done well, it can be a really important way to conserve animals. I feel that people need to see our wildlife reserves. People need to see a tiger in the wild. But we also have to be careful. I know which video you're talking about, in which the safari, the gypsy went really close to the tiger. There's no need to aggravate the animal or go that close. At the end of the day, it's a wild animal. If I'm standing by myself, and somebody walks up to me and comes too close, even I don't appreciate it as a human being. Why do we need to go so close to elephants also? Because there are so many videos of elephants charging, and actually they're not charging, it's a mock charge, in which the elephant is just coming up to the person and trumpeting and making that loud sound, probably because it's defending the young, the calves within the herd. But why do we need to go that close? We shouldn't go close to wild animals. It's really important. It is not speaking English. It is not going to listen to your polite conversation. If you respect the animal, 100% it will respect you. And all the wildlife researchers like me, we would all be dead if animals were not, respectful.
Kind, yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting, you said that you ran into a tiger, you mentioned. So can you share with us your first encounter with the wild, any wild creature?
Yeah, it's really scary, I can tell you that. We are so hardwired to feel that fear, no? So I was doing my thesis for Oxford, and I was walking in the forest. I was walking a transect, which is a fixed path that you have to walk, and you have to write down your observations, and the tiger was just right there. And the thing is that it always takes you 2 seconds to understand that there's a tiger or a leopard, because they're so perfectly camouflaged. So it was sitting in the bush, but it was on the path. not on the path, next to the path. And obviously it knew I was there. That's the second thing. The first thing is you don't know that it's there. The second thing is you realize it already knows you're there, because it's heard you coming from 1 kilometer away and it's just tolerating you. So then, it was sitting and it kind of got up, and they have such big heads, no? I mean, for me, when I see a wild tiger or a wild lion, the head is really big. Even leopards have big heads, but tigers particularly. So you're looking at something, it's got a huge face and a huge head, and you just feel fear and you feel wonder and you feel awe, you feel everything at once. And they move their ears, and because it's looking at you, trying to understand what you're doing, and the ear has a white spot behind it. So when it moves its ears, it looks like a second pair of eyes looking at you. And I distinctly remember thinking that it has 4 eyes. And I'm like, of course it doesn't have 4 eyes. I know that it's a tiger, it has 2 eyes. But at that moment in time, you have all these funny thoughts running. But that's the thing. It got up and it left. Because that's what they do. They don't, a lot of people who have experienced the same thing, and it's fairly common, because we do have tigers, and it's not just in tiger reserves, but also outside tiger reserves that people have walked into tigers. So yeah, it didn't do anything. It just left, and I was standing there, and I also left, and it was fine.
I would like to share, I had a very similar experience. I was very young. My father had gone to do the census in Kanha National Park. And at that time, the census was done on foot. So they used to leave early morning and they used to come back late evening. So one day I accompanied him. And so we didn't know that the tiger was seeing us. Like you said, it knows you're coming from 1 kilometer away. And it was very well camouflaged. We did our, like the soil sample, all that. And when we were going, obviously we had guards and everybody with us. But we saw the tiger at that time. There was excitement and panic all at once. I was very young. I was probably in class 3 or 4. But it didn't do anything. It just yawned and went away.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, usually they really are quite bored of us. Like, I have so many pictures. I have so many pictures of tigers yawning.
Yeah.
Or not looking at me, not looking at us. It's like turns its face away, like it doesn't even want to look at you. And also tigers are so, they don't get provoked easily.
Yeah.
They're very peaceful. Leopards, I think, are more reactive, but tigers are not reactive. They seem to be thinking quite a bit. So Jim Corbett has this famous line that the tiger is a gentleman, and I completely agree. Because the way they conduct themselves, they don't easily become aggressive.
Yeah.
So even the question of man-eating tigers, it's important to look at what has led to that situation. Of course, man-eating tigers should be removed, but what led to it becoming a man-eater? Because they don't easily become man-eaters. They usually they will avoid confronting or killing people.
So coming to what you said that about tigers not responding. What is your take on the NTCA rules? Basically, so we open only 20% of the jungle to the tourists, and the animals in those 20%, they're used to the gypsies. They don't react. They just live their own life. But the remaining part of the forest, I feel it's not even taken care of as much, because we don't have gypsies coming in morning, evening. So, the poachers are also, it's more approachable, and tourists sometimes act as watch guards. But the remaining 80% of the jungle doesn't have that, so the roads are not maintained. Cleanliness will happen, but it will probably not happen on schedule and stuff like that. So do you think that, it should open in rotation, or like what is your take on tourism as a tool for wildlife?
See, I don't think tiger reserves need very good roads. I think it's good to have bad roads, because then you don't have roadkill inside the tiger reserve. Everywhere where India has great roads near wildlife areas, all the animals are dead. And sometimes animals that we are searching for in surveys, we can't find them, and you find them as roadkill, like leopard cats and marble cats, animals that are very rare, can't be easily seen. But in terms of tourism, I think it's very important and it should be done. But we need a bit more action on tourists who are not behaving.
Yeah, That's true. I mean,
And honestly, I have seen the degeneration of Corbett Tiger Reserve, for example, where the tourist resorts are blocking the river, where the animal needs to drink water. At least let's agree that in the forest comes first.
you have to respect the sanctity of the place.
Yeah,
That's
and you don't want to bring the city to the forest in the sense you don't want a DJ night inside a tiger reserve. You're going to a tiger reserve to have a different experience, to experience the forest, the silence, right? And all of us need to be silent at some point in our lives. All of us need to get away from social media and what others are thinking of us and all the pressures we feel, the pressures of modern life and just being a Homo sapiens, I guess. But, there have to be, of course, there are guidelines. But, I would love for the tourism industry to have more peer review of each other, more peer pressure, the way that it works in some other industries that are more competitive. Because I see tourists misbehaving and with the animal. And to me, I see the animal being so patient and not doing anything bad.
no, absolutely. I agree with you
And
100%.
I see the same thing happening again and again from the people.
Yeah.
So I actually saw somebody hitting a langur monkey inside a tiger reserve, and I was just like, I went there, I was like, why have you come here? If this is why you came, you shouldn't have come. Like, just be at home. And so then what do? Do we ban them? And also, the forest guides and the people who are driving the safari, they don't have any power. They can only say stop it. But they don't really have any power beyond that, right? Yeah. And if the person comes back, they're let in. So this is an issue. People who are habitually badly behaved, and it can be an issue of life and death, right?
Yeah.
If it's a dangerous animal, it's how is it the animal's fault if you're provoking it again and again and again, right? So elephant videos, just look at the elephant videos in India of tourists. The elephant is charging, but then that's because you're taking your gypsy right up to the elephant again and again. So what is the elephant going to do? It doesn't understand that you're just making an Instagram reel or something.
Yeah. So when we talk about like conservation of wildlife, do you think that only conserving the habitat or the native habitat is important, or should we also look at migration as a tool? Like, should we study migration as a tool of conservation?
Migration is extremely important. Thankfully, India is doing it now. We have a national action plan for migratory birds, and we are studying, the Indian government has financed the study of where are these birds coming from. So we have birds coming, for example, from Siberia and Russia and Europe to India every year, and we are studying where they stay, how long they stay, when they leave, etc. But even within India, there is migration. So you have migration of elephant herds, for example, moving between Orissa, and now you have Orissa and Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. Now you also have elephants coming back to central India, as you know.
Yeah.
So now there are elephants, we haven't had elephants in central India for a couple of decades, but now they're coming back. So it's very important also to study interstate migrations, because an elephant, for example, it needs so much food, like 100 plus kilos of food every day, fresh water, and that's why it moves so much, because it needs to move from place to place to find food. And if we have to map the corridors that they are using and see if we can have more sustainable development on that corridor. It may not be possible to stop development, and development is not the issue. It's the kind of development we choose to do that usually is the issue. So, once we map these corridors properly, because the corridors also do change if there are lots of obstructions, then we have to make sure that we're doing some kind of slow growth or a green growth in those areas. So yes, we have to conserve beyond the tiger reserve. And even the case of Avni, perhaps things would not have been so bad for that poor tigress if she was inside a more protected area. So of course there are animals outside.
But ironically, after Avni, we did candle marches, we made her a hero. Of course, because the virtue of her being a protective mother, added to it. But somehow the campaign lost its main mudda of conservation. Avni is a tigress. She became a hero. But what the candle marches should have focused on, if at all, should have been the concept of conservation, tiger conservation, not just one tigress. So I think we lost the essence there.
Yeah, and my book mentions how We just like that one animal or that
Yeah.
one individual, but the issue is beyond Avni, right? The issue is what are the things that led her to become a man-eater, and how can we safeguard tiger habitat? So you have a tigress and there are cows there every day, and she has these 3 cubs, and she is going to eat the cow because the place is full of cows. And then there is a person with a cow who wants to protect his cows, and the tigress is seeing that person every day with the cows. There's going to be conflict, and perhaps that is what is leading to the unfortunate chain of events that happened in which she became a man-eater. So even when NH7 was being broadened, we needed a lot more mitigation on that stretch. So at that time, I had appealed to people that you care so much for Avni, but there are thousands of other Avnis in India who also need support, meaning let's plan our development more sustainably, and let's make it a rule that if you're going to make highways, you have to mitigate and let animals cross also,
Yeah.
not just for cars.
You spoke about elephants coming back to central India. So recently cheetahs were brought back to India, and India has been one of the places they originally, existed. Do you think? What is your take on it? Do you think it's a powerful statement in the conservation field, or?
No. I'll tell you, I'll give you my reason why. My reason is, okay, this is an African cheetah, it's not an Asian cheetah, but that's not my problem. It's a grassland species, and we have grassland species that are doing really badly today. The great Indian bustard, as we spoke about. There's also a bird called lesser florican, which is also a kind of bustard. Then you have the Indian wolf that also lives near grasslands. These animals are doing really badly. And honestly, as I said, most people in India don't know what Indian wolf looks like, right? Even I didn't know till some time ago. So if we can use the cheetah to help fund and preserve new grassland places, that would be helpful. In its present form, they are inside enclosures in Kuno. Kuno was already protected. So, I mean, maybe in a way, in terms of making people love a wild animal, maybe in that sense it's helpful. But at this present moment, it's not helpful for any of those other grassland species that require so much help. And the great Indian bustard is a species that we are going to lose if we don't act now.
Similarly, the Nicobar
Megapode. Yeah. So the Nicobar megapode is found only in Nicobar. It is an Indian bird, it's an endemic Indian bird, and we are making this giant airport and this giant port and township. And my only question to the EIA and to the project developers, and we are taking this further, we're going to, raise these questions everywhere. They're not doing anything for the megapode as per the plan. So this is what I'm saying. You have to make the plan before you make the construction. I don't think this is a generation that should allow wildlife to be an afterthought. It's not an afterthought, especially if it's an Indian bird. It's not found anywhere else. So let's make that plan before we construct.
Even the leatherback turtles, the same thing is happening with them. 130 square kilometers of their habitat is going to go in the airport that they are trying to build.
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to ask you one question before we really run out of time. Is that whenever I read about you in the last few days, your work in Nagaland really popped up. Like the Amur Falcon's work that you've done. So I want you to share with us how were we able to the villagers who were hunters there turned into protectors, and their entire journey, the awareness. Please share your journey.
So, the Amur falcon is a migratory bird. It comes to India from Siberia and Russia and China, and most of the global population comes to northeast first. So it comes to Nagaland and Manipur, then it crosses India and goes to Africa. And we know that there's a culture of hunting in the northeast, but we learned that the Amur falcons were being hunted at completely unsustainable numbers. So about 10,000 every day for many days on end. And so we just feared that the entire global population will collapse because, there have been birds before and animals before that are no longer there on earth because they were hunted. There's a kind of pigeon known as the passenger pigeon, which was really common in the US. It was as common as the pigeon that we see in India. But it was hunted so much that it is today extinct. So we feared that the scale of the hunting was too much. So there were many of us, it was a coalition of us, and we started work in that village. And that is where the migration maps really helped us. So we told the villagers that the birds are coming from another country and they're going to go to another continent in Africa. And so these guys didn't know. In fact, even we had not studied it in so much detail before, because it's not a bird that had got any conservation attention before. It was not very easy because conservation in India is tiger dominated. It was not very easy to get the government agencies to work with us initially, but after our work picked up and we worked a lot with the local community, they are really the ones who should get all the credit for the conservation of the falcon, because they passed resolutions following all our outreach and advocacy with them. They are the ones who passed the resolution saying we will not hunt anymore. And it worked because it was a smaller area. So we worked in a few villages and we did eco clubs with them, and we also, of course, reached out to all the other stakeholders like government, etc. There's still a lot of wild animal illegal hunting in India, of course, and each of it will require site-specific interventions. So, you have birds and animals. Pangolins are getting hunted in India, everywhere, and other kinds of... Okay, I'm going to tell you about wires, power lines, and how they're so bad for birds. And, we think power lines are great because they bring power to us. But where we put power lines is a very important question. Any kind of high tension wire can be a problem for large birds. If the birds are social and flock in very big numbers, the problem gets bigger too. Most social birds will flock, forage, and fly together. Imagine a flock of greater flamingos looking for food together. Their movements are graceful as they poke a wetland with their long upturned beaks. Then a sudden sound breaks the air. The birds get alarmed. They lift up their great bodies elegantly, flying in a synchronized fashion all together. Until now, the scene appears normal, it appears beautiful. But the same group of flamingos collides with wires, high tension wires. And as they collide together, they fall to the ground together, collapsing in a heap of white and pink feathers. A mass extermination that is unmourned by us. In 2011, near the Kutch sanctuary in Gujarat, 139 greater flamingos were killed after colliding with wires, found dead, spread-eagled under the wires. It's ironic that sanctuaries for water birds will try to save levels of water, will try to keep out pollution, will protect the nests of birds. Yet, just like the Great Indian Bustard, no one is monitoring the skyline. Even in a wild bird safe place like a sanctuary, the horizon can loom with death. And this is a huge problem. We are losing tens of thousands of birds every year to high tension wires. We don't even know the full numbers because they die and they get scavenged by other wildlife, so we don't even find the dead bodies. 18,000 birds every year in Thar Desert alone are dying because of power lines. So, you can imagine the number in all of India. Thank you.
So to conclude, I would like to, quote another line from the book, which kind of was an alarm clock in my head. There is no wilderness anymore, only places with varying amounts of human impact. Now, it's a very, very power-punched and, guilt-inducing statement that has come. But it has left food for thought that we have impacted everything. There's no wilderness. So even though the wilderness is there, let's just kind of join hands to protect it as much as we can. We can have the questions now.
Thank you so much for the wonderful discussion. The session is now open to the audience for only a couple of questions because of the crunch of time that we have.
Thank you for very interesting discussion, Nupur and Neha. And I join you in your passion for wildlife conservation. So my question is, do we need to go to wild only or to jungles to understand the conservation regarding conservation or to protect the wildlife. Can we do something sitting in the city, because that makes sense, more sense? Like you can suggest that. I want your opinion and thoughts regarding this, like growing good plants, flowering plants for butterflies, for pollinators, and for honeybees. Can we do something for that?
Thank you, ma'am. So in the book, you have urban wildlife also. And in fact, the tiger butterfly chapter is all about butterflies that come to us in our cities. And cities also are on migration paths of animals. So it's not just resident animals, but also migratory wildlife that come to cities. So it's very important for us to start with planting native vegetation in our gardens, because plants are the basis of any ecosystem. And native plants are the basis of native ecosystems. Therefore, if we even start by patronizing native trees and native shrubs and native flowers in our garden, it makes a very huge impact. And if you can imagine the number of gardens we have, it would kind of be a wildlife corridor for butterflies and for birds. I live in Delhi, we get migratory birds there, we get probably millions of migratory birds stopping by at different times of the year. And we are also trying to make these butterfly gardens, which will be like a corridor throughout the city. Because, even a butterfly finds it hard to cross a road because you have very big vehicles coming, there's a lot of pollution. Even the trees on the central verge have to be picked in a manner that it's a native tree that can survive there. And even a tree on a central verge gives refuge to a butterfly that needs to cross that road, and a bird that may have come from Europe or Asia, wherever. So yes, absolutely, wildlife is never far from us, and planning our cities, not just as smart cities, but also as cities with native vegetation, is really the first step, and it'll make a great difference. Yeah.
One last question that we can have.
Thank you very much. I think it was an excellent presentation, and I hope that your book, which focuses on animals other than the main flagship animals, will make some significant contribution to the conservation of wildlife. Just 3 points I would like to make. One is that you very nicely and very aptly pointed out about the issue of the power lines coming in the way of migrating birds. I hope you are aware that in the Supreme Court, a number of conservationists, including Dr. M.K. Ranjit Singh, who is responsible for bringing the cheetah from Africa to Kuano, they filed a PLI in the Supreme Court on this issue only. And I think the Supreme Court has asked some very pointed questions to the state governments and the Government of India, Ministry of Environment, to know what mitigation steps are being taken.
Sorry to interrupt you, but your question, please.
No, I'm just informing her. Right, nothing. So, 2 more, okay, coming to the questions only. One is that I hope that in your new next edition, you will include the vultures, because I think the vultures are one of the most sort of decimated and endangered species that we have in India today.
Thank you for that. We were actually...
No, one more only, sorry. This is a question. Sorry. You mentioned about the elephants. Now, the elephants in India have a big problem in the sense that this is only animal that migrates over, you're aware, the thousands of kilometers, not just from north to south, one part of the district to the other. It's very intelligent, and this is the only animal that destroys its habitat other than human beings. So now, when I had spoken to some of the conservationists like Dr. Sukumar and Dr. Vijay and others, they think that this is a fossil species, which is sort of anachronistic and has lost its time. And unlike the rhino, which was confined to Kaziranga and the Povitara area and in UP.
Sir, I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but we really have
I'll wind it up.
a crunch of time.
This is very uncomfortable, I must say. Anyway, my question is that what do you think about the future of the elephant in the country? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm aware of the Supreme Court case, sir. We were also involved in that case, but unfortunately, after that order came, a lot of illegal construction has happened in which the power companies are making wires illegally. All of this has been brought to the notice of the Supreme Court, but nothing has been done. So we are kind of in a deadlock over there. As far as the elephant is concerned, I don't believe in words like fossils. While elephants do destroy young trees or bamboo in order to eat them, they're also the gardeners of the forest. They plant trees because their dung has all the seeds, and a lot of forests germinate where elephants walk. Having said that, we have 30,000 elephants, and I think we might need to consider contraceptives. There are contraceptives that work very well on African elephants, because there's no point in pretending that we are good to them, because we're absolutely terrible to our elephants. In fact, the elephant chapter in this book is probably the saddest chapter. And in Bengal, people are throwing fireballs at elephants, and the government is sanctioning it. So it's better to have fewer elephants than to throw fireballs at such an intelligent and such a deeply bonded species that remembers things as per the location of the place. So elephant researchers will always tell you that they have memories that are place specific. So if in a place the herd has had a negative experience, they don't want to go back to that place, or they become very different when they come to that place. So I think if we are not going to take care of our elephants, we should consider contraceptives, but I don't believe it's a fossil. I think the Indian forest owes a lot to the elephant. There are many studies on how elephants help in farming the forest and planting trees. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for the wonderful session, and thank you so much, readers. I'm sure we all take back sensitized hearts, carrying a lot more empathy for these beautiful beings around us, human beings. To express our appreciation, we shall be resorting to a picture rather than mere 1,000 words. It gives me great joy to ask our moderator to present our author with a very special painting made for her by Dhani Agrawal from Alag Angle community. I request Dhani Agrawal and Miss Nupur Agrawal to present the painting to our author.
I know there are more questions, so I'll be available downstairs. If anybody wants their book signed, I'll be there as well.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Do make sure you buy the book Wild and Willful, authored by Miss Neha Sinha, who is available downstairs for interactions as well as signing your books. Thank you so much.